Hey y'all, and welcome to Unhappy Teacher Podcast, where we discuss all things education, including some of the challenges and struggles that teachers face and how we can overcome them together to live our best positive lives in this profession. I'm your host, Courtney Sillah, and I want to share with you my personal journey that led me to a career that I did not want to embrace at first. Teaching. That's right. I never wanted to become a teacher. Believe it or not, this was something that was not a goal of mine. It was not a plan. I did not have it on my radar at all. In fact, my mom used to tell me, you should become a teacher, or why don't you go do substitute teaching? She worked in education herself, but again, I just did not see myself becoming a teacher. Although I did not see myself becoming a teacher, I am very grateful that this career chose me. Despite all the hardships and the struggles, the ups and downs, I was able to see directly how I was making a difference in students' lives, the impact I was making, as well as being able to see firsthand some of the struggles, some of the shortcomings and flaws that our education system has. And I can stand here, or I can sit here today and talk to you on this podcast and advocate for education, advocate for teachers. So who am I? I'm an experienced educator with over a decade of teaching experience in international and urban education, specializing in ESOL, English as a Second Language. I also have some leadership experience throughout my career. I've worn many different hats. I've been grade and department chair, as well as instructional lead literacy teacher. My proudest achievement right now is being an educational consultant with Destiny Christian Academy in Sierra Leone, where I'm able to work directly with teachers, helping them to solve issues in low resource communities. So that is something that I'm very, very passionate about. And I deeply want to continue to help educators, hence why we are here today with this podcast. With all that said, again, teaching was not a goal of mine. I'm proud to have all these accolades, but again, it was not something that I said, hey, let's do A, B, C, and D, and this is where I want to be. I truly believe it was divine intervention that provided me with these experiences and the knowledge to be able to sit here in front of you today and share my story in hopes that it will help others. So let me tell you about my start. In undergrad, I got my Bachelor of Arts in Media and Communication with the goal of producing television. Again, nowhere on my radar was I trying to be a teacher. I was fortunate enough to have a couple of internships in television, but I wasn't landing that gig, that career, that job. So I also danced. I love dancing. So I fell back on my passion, which was dancing and choreographing. It was fun. It was great. I got to work with a few artists, and I really enjoyed and was pushing for that career. I was like, okay, if it's not going to be in television where I'm behind the camera, I'm going to be in front of it dancing, right? So then I received a job as a dance teacher, and that was my first experience witnessing a high expectation or high levels of education. So in New York City, our public schools are huge. We have about 4 or 5 floors, and on one floor was a charter school. So therefore, that charter school was sharing a building with the public school. I had never seen anything like that. And at the time, charter schools were becoming more and more popular. So again, within this charter school, I saw that the classrooms were named after colleges. That was the first time I saw that. The students were wearing uniforms. The students were expected to carry portfolios. And I was very, very impressed. Now, I don't know all the inner workings of the charter schools at the time, but what I saw was very impressive. At the same time, I was a little concerned because I'm thinking, one building, 2 different experiences. What about the children underneath? What about the children on the other floors? What type of education what type of education were they being exposed to? So that was something a little unique to me. I guess from there, again, I'm out of college. I'm trying to figure out how to be in the television world. I'm dancing, but I'm a dance teacher here. And so I know I wanted more. And therefore, Eventually, I started listening to my mom's voice, who kept telling me, well, why don't you be a teacher? Well, you know what? Okay, well, just go ahead and substitute teach, as she would tell me. Just go ahead and apply to be a substitute teacher as you're waiting and seeing what's going to happen next. Of course, I was still like, no, 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 and no. But I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to try and apply for this teacher alternative program. I don't remember what it was called at the time, but I said, well, let me go ahead and see what it's about. Long story short, I didn't get in. I believe I applied. They denied me. Okay, fine. Well, there was another opportunity that piqued my interest where I had a couple of friends from college that were teaching in South Korea. And so, I just messaged them like, hey, how did you go about doing this? And they shared the information with me. It was called EPIK. That's EPIK. So it was English program in Korea. And at the time, they were just looking for native English speakers. And you did have to have your TEFL certification. So that's TEFL, your TEFL certification. So as I began to research more and more, I realized I just had to sign up to get my certification. I did an online course, and once I got that certification, I applied for the program. It was a Skype interview. I remember Skype was still very popular at the time. And I remember just telling my parents like, hey, I think I'm going to South Korea. And as supportive as my parents were, I knew they were kind of like, where did this come from? And so again, I went through all the process, the steps, and I got approved. So next thing I know, I'm on my way to South Korea. So that was in 2012. I taught in Pohang, South Korea at a public elementary school. I taught 3rd and 5th grade. And that was set up where I was a native English speaker, but there was also an English teacher. So it was a classroom with 2 teachers, so co-taught. So not only did I work in the public school, I then also did after school program that was like sponsored by that school. And so it's like, for example, like how here in America, we send our children to Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA, PAL. It was like that. So then I would do after school English teaching where I was the only teacher in that classroom and one of the only people that spoke English in that building. So that was a fun experience, but again, nonetheless, it was all worth it. So fast forward, we're coming up at the end of my 1-year contract and I have to make a decision. Am I going to renew my contract and stay out here, or am I going to go back home? And I knew that I did not want to just go back home without a plan. Before I realized that I was going to go ahead and apply for grad school, I kept getting asked by the teachers like, well, are you a teacher? This can't be your first year teaching. I mean, they thought that I was a teacher for years because I guess I was so good at it. It came naturally. It just came naturally to me. And so after hearing this for a long time from people who didn't know me, and then going back to my mother's words, I said, okay, you know what, God? I'm going to apply to this program. And if I get in, then I guess I will become a teacher. That literally was my thought, like just try it. And so I remember having to actually go take the GRE in Korea, and that is a whole story about how that happened. I tell you, divine intervention, because I almost missed that test. I remember having to get on a 4-hour train into Seoul and staying overnight, and then having to take a taxi to the campus where the test was being administered, and no one spoke English that I came into encounter with the taxi. He just dropped me off at the gate, and there was no one around who understood me, and I'm trying desperately to find out where to take the test, and I was flustered. I was almost about to cry, and then lo and behold, one girl, the one person I saw on that campus walking, was also looking for the test. A young Korean girl who understood enough English to get us both to the correct testing site. And I promise you, it was like 1 minute and they were closing the door. So I made it, took the GRE, applied to Georgia State University, and literally the night before I was scheduled to leave Korea, I got an email that said, hey, we want to interview you for this program. And so I knew that on my arrival back to New York City, that 2 weeks later, I would be in Atlanta, Georgia, interviewing for the UACM program, which is Urban Accelerated Certification Master's program at Georgia State University. So I interviewed, came back home a few days later, found out that I was one of 27 people in that cohort to be accepted. And so I was moving to Atlanta. So you have to be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. And so that is really how I came into teaching. Again, it did not start off as a plan, but it quickly began to all unravel. So again, I get my master's, and again, in my mind, getting my master's in early childhood education, I was only going to do it for 3 years, just enough to complete the program, do a year of teaching, fulfill my grant, and then I wanted to get back out there in the world. Now with an actual teaching certification and master's under my belt. But of course, things change. You get grounded here, life happens, find a husband, have a baby, open a dance studio. And so I quickly just became all raveled up in education. So going back to those first 3 years of being a teacher, it was almost like I was like a robot, just pushing out lesson plans because I was still doing my master's program my first year of teaching. And so my lesson plans were long like essays. And I was just doing this. And I did not know better because I was just a first year teacher. I didn't really have mentorship. So the things that they're telling me to do, I'm just doing it. And I'm literally just working like a robot until about that 4th year. I feel like it all became crumbling down. It was about that 4th or 5th year where I experienced my first anxiety attack. And that was scary. Like I said, up until then, I was just working. I was doing lesson plans, thorough lesson plans for all the subjects. I didn't know that I could put just a little here and there. And then I was also grade chair. So my 2nd year of teaching, I think they made me grade chair. And I was like, what is that? What do I do? And then it just kept happening year after year after year after year. And again, by that 4th or 5th year, I found myself in the corner of the computer lab, bent down in the corner, crying, trying to breathe because I just felt like it was all too much. And I'm thankful that I had that, I want to say, work mother who came, grabbed me, and prayed for me. And I appreciate her to this day. I'm still in contact with her. I even tried to, I think, like leave and transfer my school at the time because I was just so still stressed out. But something kept holding me and keeping me grounded there to that school. I'm like, man, I guess my work is not done yet. It's still something here that I need. Then COVID happened. And as you know, we all went to virtual learning. And that was challenging, constantly having to track down kids, use language services to contact parents, which I just have to say the sidebar. After COVID was over, then they got rid of that language service, which made no sense. How am I going to speak to parents and they don't even speak English? Anyway, COVID happened. We went to virtual learning, right? And then I remember as soon as the schools were about to open back up again, I got a call from my principal who asked me if I would come back in the classroom and teach 4th grade ELA and social studies. Now, I knew that was coming. I knew that one day I would be pulled back into the classroom. And I didn't know how or when, but I knew it was coming because I was such a strong teacher. I knew that I was a natural leader. So as any administration, I would look for my strong teachers and say, hey, this is where I need you at most. So I kindly accepted, but not without first doing a personal assessment to really ask myself, 1, is it something that I want to do? 2, is it something that I can withstand? Because I know the stresses I felt before. So my mindset was, yes, I'll do it again, but this time it's going to be different. I'm not about to work myself into the ground to where I have an anxiety and panic attack again. So there were certain things that I knew I had to put in place to protect myself. One was become aware. I had to become aware when I got to that point of being overworked and overwhelmed. That was the number one thing I needed to know about myself and before I went back into the classroom. So I'm back in the classroom, I'm teaching fourth grade. And then I believe a year or two after that, I think within that same year, I became pregnant. And I had to go on bed rest. So I didn't even finish out that school year, or did I not start the next school year because I was in hospital in the bed for about 6 months. Yep. And then after that, going back to work was challenging. I have a whole separate video on my challenges with being on bed rest, but postpartum, postpartum was something totally different. I was no longer able to just jump back in and do as much as I was before. Everything was different now. And it was challenging. It was very challenging to try to jump back in to the classroom and being everything for all of the kids and everybody. It was just overwhelming. And so some of the things that I had built up, such as being aware when it was too much, the alarm started to go off. I had to start creating boundaries where it was like, hey, no negativity today. You cannot come into this classroom if you have a negative attitude. When I would go into work in the morning, I would have to set the mood. I would have to have certain songs on, playlists on. It was a lot of different things I had to do to really get my mind right for that day. Moving forward, ultimately, I ended up leaving that school in that position and entering middle school. Middle school language arts is a different beast. Middle school students are a different beast. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you, I wanted to go to middle school because I needed to see what happened to my babies from elementary to middle school. And boy, oh boy, oh boy. I don't even know how I could have better prepared myself for all the hormonal changes with these little people who think they grown, but they not grown, but they want to be independent. I mean, it's weird. But all that to say, I'm grateful that teaching chose me because, again, I'm able to see how I'm leaving a lasting impression on my students. I say, 80% of the time, I'm actually being a mentor, trying to instill things in them, life lessons. And honestly, the other little 20% is probably where the content comes because I'm really just trying to get their minds open, trying to change their mindset about learning, about education, and about who they are. So again, all through the hardships and the struggles, I still chose to stay. I chose to stay in that profession and chose to teach because I knew that journey wasn't over yet. And so I ask you again, if you are thinking about becoming a teacher, or you are currently in the classroom teaching, or even in education, ask yourself why. Why? Why did you want to become an educator? I need you to dig deep, not just surface level, but to dig deep. What's your backstory? What was it that made you love working with children? What's that backstory? Dig deeper and think. If you are currently a teacher or you're thinking about becoming a teacher, I ask you to think about your why. Why did you want to become a teacher in the first place? Don't just, say I want to help students, I want to help kids. That's the start, but what's your backstory? Why do you like helping people? Why do you like working with children? And most importantly, what impact do you want to leave? What impression do you want to have on these students? So if you need help with this, you need help with finding the answers, that's where I come in. I've been an unhappy teacher. I've been where you are, trying to decide, should I stay, should I go? What is my life about? Why am I even doing this? I'm here to help you. You can start by simply doing a self-assessment of yourself. Go ahead below and click in the description and you can download the self-assessment worksheet that will help you to answer some of these questions and truly dig deep about your journey and your reason why you want to be an educator. Again, I never wanted to be a teacher, but this was a calling. It's something that chose me. I'm grateful for my experiences, and now I'm happy to share them with you. Before we get out of here, let me leave you with this quote from Rita Pearson. Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best they can possibly be. Thank you for listening to the Unhappy Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Sillah. And remember to stay true to your purpose, and together, let's strive to make a positive change in education. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. I'm out.